If the thousands of Uganda Asians who face expulsion were worried about their future before, they're extremely alarmed now. President Amin, who went on record the other day with a statement that Hitler had the right answer when he gassed 6 million Jews, has warned them that if they aren't out of the country by November the 8th, they'll be rounded up and placed in camps under military control.
I took this decision for the economy of Uganda. I want to see that the whole Kampala street is not full of Indians. It must be proper black and administration in those shops.
What will happen to these people if they don't go by the time limit?
I think they will be sitting like they are sitting on the fire. I will tell you this. You just wait after 3 months.
What will you do to them?
Okay, you will see.
There was tight security at the station, designed to ensure that none of the expelled Asians left the train to slip illegally into Kenya. For many of the older passengers, the train journey was the final irony. They, or their parents, had originally emigrated to Uganda to build the railway, which was now being used to expel them.
President Amin may deny his policy is racist, but from what he said, he certainly wants to rid himself of all the Asians he can, whatever nationality they claim. Some will clearly be left stateless.
It is just like that. We just have to leave our property. As we came here without money, we just have to go without money, that's all.
Each of the 189 refugees on board had paid £110 to be on this, the first of the special flights bringing the expelled Asians to Britain, many told of being robbed at gunpoint before leaving.
The Canadian team of immigration officials is now ready for business in offices next to the British High Commission. Mr. Trudeau has already said that Canada will take exceptional measures to admit those Asians who might not otherwise qualify to go there.
If these other Ugandan Asians come, there's no doubt that they will add to overcrowding, and once they arrive within the city, it'll be extraordinarily difficult to keep track of them. We won't get rid of them once they've come.
These would be people who would be rotting in concentration camps simply because of the color of their skins. I cannot believe that anyone in this country, with our sense of fairness, of humanity, and of responsibility, would have regarded such an outcome as being acceptable to the British people.
When we arrived at State House in Entebbe, General Amin announced himself as the Black Hitler, the name given to him by the Liberal leader Jeremy Thorpe. He said he was happy with the title because it meant he was a strong, tough man.
There are very many Jews who are also controlling your economy in Britain. I think you know this.
Nachiket Devlukia, his wife Hazumati, and their daughter Nalexia arrived in Britain exactly a week ago. He's 28. A month ago in Uganda, he had a prosperous wholesale business, his own house and a new car.
If I get a job as a clerk or a cashier.
Because you weren't able to take out any money from your business?
Yeah, not a single money we were allowed to take out.
So really it's a case of completely starting again?
Yes, a completely new life.
The Asian community had only received an invitation to send representatives to meet the president overnight, and some of them frankly admitted that they were too frightened to attend. Finally, a dozen of their leaders gathered at midday at General Amin's house, the command post as it's called, to learn their fate. Then came the diplomatic representatives of Britain, India and Pakistan. This was the first time that our man in Uganda, Mr. Richard Slater, had been officially informed of President Amin's plans to expel the Asians. The High Commissioner did have some time alone with the President. While up on the open roof, ministers sat about with nothing to do. Even the diplomats were left waiting uncomfortably for the President to arrive, with only a smile from Uganda's roving ambassador, the former Princess Elizabeth of Toro, to brighten what must have been for them a painful situation. When President Amin finally appeared, he asked his guests to join him in a buffet lunch. By inviting everyone together in the presence of the press, he'd effectively denied any single envoy or Asian spokesman the opportunity to influence his decision. His mind was made up, his statement already in his pocket. Those who had come hoping to negotiate found themselves merely an audience. It was clear that the President was standing firm on his decision to expel as many Asians as possible. With the exception of professional men, technicians and civil servants, not only British Asians, but those of Indian and Pakistani nationality would have to go too. And even those who claimed to be Ugandan citizens would have to prove it all over again if they were to stay. The President denied that his decision was either racialist or anti-British. The mass expulsion was purely in the interests of Uganda's economy.
Actually, I took this decision for the economy of Uganda. And I must make sure that every Ugandans get a fruit of independence. Since independent, actually Uganda is not yet independent, I will say that. Even when the British handed over on the 9th of October 1962, the Uganda still not yet independent. Uganda will be independent after this, my decision, after I want to see that the whole Kampala street is not full of Indians. It must be proper black, and administration in those shops is run by the Ugandans.
Would you like to get all Asians out, really, sir?
Yes, they must go to their country.
Even nationals of Uganda?
If they want to go, they are welcome to go.
What will happen to these people if they don't go by the time they're in?
I think they will be sitting like they are sitting on the fire. I will tell you this. You just wait after 3 months.
What will you do to them?
Okay, you will see.
You said you wanted Uganda.
I think they will not sit comfortable here in Uganda. I will tell you this. I must actually tell you the truth.
Have you asked the British to take them away, sir?
That you are building transit camp for them if they are not going?
I am not responsible for building them transit camp.
Have you asked the British to take them away, sir?
Yes, it is a British High Commissioner is here, his responsibility.
Yes.
I have told him.
You've said you wanted to teach Britain a lesson, President. Why is that?
And that is now lesson I am teaching the British. I am teaching now the lesson because I am correcting them from the mistake they had made. If they had think before earlier that there is African here who can even work and building the railway with the instruction given to them by the British, this problem will not happen.
Isn't this going to end your friendship with Britain?
I don't mind ending. What are you giving me? What is more you are giving me? British actually deceived me last year, giving me £10 million. They never give up to now. When I had a really very critical problem of finance, up to now. Now I don't want that man again. And now they have given, I think every year, 4.5 million every year. But this, even if they withdrawn or they take it away, it will not marking time Uganda even 1 minute. I must make this clear. But the British are my best friends.
I wish I understood that.
As the interview ended, the British High Commissioner, a lonely figure as he stood surrounded by Ugandan ministers, felt he must speak.
I explained to you this morning the difficulties which my government foresees in what you were proposing this morning and what you have announced this afternoon. And I would like to make it clear that I had to reserve my government's position on the rate of admission of our Asian passport holders, UK passport holders, the responsibility for which we accept and have never denied. But the position of my government on that question, on the rate of admission, has clearly got to be reserved, and I have now got to report what you have decided and seek further instructions. And I would only like to conclude by thanking you for your friendly references to the British personally and for your hospitality.
It was an extraordinary spectacle, and in its dialogue between the British High Commissioner and President Amin, open diplomacy at its most bizarre. And despite the exemptions and exceptions he's made, the President stands firm on his decision. Within 3 months, thousands of Asians will be thrust upon Britain, whether we or they like it or not. Richard Lindley, News at 10, at the command post, Kampala.
Because they are British citizens, and because successive governments has accepted that they are British citizens and had no alternative. They are, in fact, British citizens.
Do you then accept that President Amin has a right to throw them out?
No, it does not. Well, you can't stop a ruler of a country if he wants to behave in this way, throwing them out. But he has thrown them out for racial reasons. There's no other reason except he says they damage the economy, which is nonsense, because the Asians, in fact, contribute a great deal to the economy of all the African countries. They're good traders, good businessmen, good shopkeepers, and all the rest of it. There's no doubt this will cause terrible hardship to these people, and we have our obligation towards them.
Apart from just negotiating with him, as presumably you now will, what else can you do to stop him? What pressures can you bring to bear?
Well, we shall have to get in touch with him again following the High Commissioner's meeting this afternoon, because he has said that he will modify his plan and that he will exempt from expulsion various categories of people. Therefore, we have to find out what he means by this and find out whether, if he's willing to do this, he will return to an orderly plan for the introduction of these Asians into this country. I don't put this very high. What he said this afternoon doesn't amount to much. It will be a few thousands out of perhaps 50,000. And therefore, this is a mass expulsion on any count. Nevertheless, we have to follow this up diplomatically and very soon and urgently.
But what will you do to Uganda if the whole of this thing goes ahead? Will you stop aid?
I can't imagine that anybody in this country would understand if aid was given to another country which is expelling compulsorily British citizens.
Is that a threat?
I'd leave it like that for today, but I did say in the House of Commons the other day that if he goes forward with this plan, of course, we have to review the whole of our economic relationship with Uganda.
Is that a threat when you say that?
No, I don't want to use threats. I think it's just a fact of life that we face up to, that people would not understand. I shouldn't understand myself, and I don't think other people would either.
Already, Asians in Uganda are getting ready to go, and the Africans are more than ready to help them. President Amin had hardly finished making his final policy statement before queues began forming here at the Kampala Council Clinic. Before Britain or anyone else will accept them, the Asians know they must have their smallpox, cholera and yellow fever inoculations. It's all part of a painful process of endless documentation that affects every single one of them, however little he or she may understand the issues involved. Outside the passport office of the British High Commission, Asians gathered to register as British citizens to make sure that their names were on the list when the evacuation flights they expect the British to arrange materialise. Inside, a desperately overworked consular staff grappled with the individual problems of those who'd long been in the queue for a voucher and those who suddenly realised how bleak their future in Uganda looked. None came away satisfied. As yet, the rules of entry into Britain remain as strict as ever. 3,000 vouchers a year for the whole of East Africa. Now, as many as 40,000 British Asians have been told to get out. A 90-day clock has already started ticking. Even if it began flying now, a jumbo jet flight every day might not be sufficient to cope with the numbers involved. What do you think is going to happen to people whom President Amin says must leave? Will Britain help them?
Oh yes, I think so. They will have to help. Under any circumstances, they'll have to take us.
Why is that?
We are British subject. We have been issued British passports. So they will have, that is their responsibility.
What about businesses here? Can you sell your businesses? Will you be able to do that?
We have to sell.
We are trying. Who will buy? There is no buyers. We just have to leave it like that. There's no buyers.
Why are there no buyers?
Well, Africans themselves are very poor. They can't afford to buy so much business, even properties. I don't think so.
No one will be able to get money?
No, unless Uganda government itself helps them. Then I think they can buy it, you see. It is just like that. We just have to leave our property. As we came here without money, we just have to go without money. That's all.
Even some British Asians allowed to stay, there are perhaps between 5 and 10,000, want to leave. And it's not surprising. For at the Ugandan Immigration Office, every effort is being made to strike Asians off the list of Ugandan nationals. We were not allowed to film, but Asians told me that anyone reporting to the office as ordered without precisely the right documents had his Ugandan passport swiftly cancelled. Some will clearly be left stateless. President Amin may deny his policy is racist, but from what he said, he certainly wants to rid himself of all the Asians he can, whatever nationality they claim. It seems that every one of the 80,000 Asians here has his own particular problem of identity. Where does he belong? What country will reject or reluctantly accept him? So many pieces of paper are needed, so many offices must be visited, so many bureaucrats placated. For these people, a nightmarish 90 days has just begun. Richard Lindley, News at 10, Kampala.
What I asked them to do this morning was to take particular care in the coming weeks and months to operate the system, which of course has been in operation for a long time. For a long time it has been the fact that they should not embark United Kingdom passport holders from East Africa or India and places like that unless they have got proper entry documents into this country. Now they have been operating that, and I'm not making any complaint about the way they've been doing it. But what we're most anxious to avoid is any danger of a panic rush.
Did you make it clear to the airlines that they would have to bear the cost of sending back any immigrants who slipped through the net?
Yes, indeed, we'd have the power to do that, and I warned them that although we wanted to work by cooperation, this was a power which in these circumstances the government would have to use if necessary. But we want to work by cooperation, and there was certainly plenty of spirit of cooperation this morning.
Was it your impression that the airlines would give you 100% cooperation?
Oh, indeed. They've got difficulties, and there's no good denying it, but I think they are 100% behind us, because in the end they know that it is in the interest of humanity for these people that a panic rush should not be allowed to develop. But if they did come here all of a rush, it would be very serious. And above all, we want time to try to persuade Uganda and any other countries where the problem might arise that if this problem has to be met, it is met over a reasonable period of time.
In Kampala's city square, you don't have to agree with President Amin's policies to understand how he and his black African compatriots feel. As far as the eye can see, the ground is thick with Asians. After the president's tough words at this very spot, in which he said he wanted to see Africans take over the high streets from the Asians, it was a surprise to find so many of those due for speedy deportation prepared to take their usual stroll. General Amin has, after all, called this an economic war, for which he will award medals in a year's time, and in which there will be, no doubt, many Asian casualties. The scent of the battle now beginning can be detected at the meetings Uganda's ministers have been addressing all over the country. At Bombo, 20 miles north of the capital, it was the Minister for Commerce and Industry who was the guest of honour. The traders left him in no doubt that they approved the government's decision to expel the Asians and made it plain that they were not particularly concerned to distinguish between citizens and non-citizens as far as the Asians were concerned.
When our fellow Africans inherit the business that has been carried on by these non-citizens, and as a result they grow rich.
Brown skin's bad, black skin's good, was the message. The speech-making was interspersed with traditional music and dancing. This was, after all, a celebration, in the president's words, of economic independence, 10 years after Uganda gained her political freedom. Much like any politician, the minister showed himself to be at one with the people by joining in the dancing. For the Africans here, it's a very happy occasion, but for any Asians within earshot, there are certainly none visible. It must be pretty frightening. The African traders are calling on the government to collect any Asians who remain after the exodus together in sort of trading ghettos in the big towns. It's quite clear that the anti-British Asian campaign is going to extend to those who remain here too. Talk of a war of liberation against those Asians who are alleged to be sabotaging the economy seems liable to inflame unsophisticated people with a dangerous zeal. Few attacks on Asians have yet been reported, but as the 90 days grace they've been given begins to expire, the atmosphere, for the moment surprisingly relaxed, must grow more tense. Richard Lindley, News at 10, Uganda.
Well, I have had a formal invitation conveyed to me by the President through the High Commissioner, and I've been very warmly greeted on my arrival. And I think the thing now is to say, well, we have an opportunity to talk. We need to talk. This is a problem that affects two governments that have been on very friendly terms.
How long do you expect to stay now?
Well, certainly until we've had our talk, and I think until we've had our lunch too. A little luncheon never did two statesmen any harm.
Altogether, the discussions in which Ugandan ministers took part lasted an hour and 3/4. Mr. Ripon then drove to State House in Entebbe for lunch with the President. Before they sat down, they walked together through the grounds in friendly fashion.
Doing well. We must see that the tree grows like a plant.
Yes.
However irritating Mr. Ripon may have found it to be kept waiting so long for this meeting, he was clearly determined to establish friendly personal relations. As he said later, he'd not come to make threats. After its initial angry reaction, the British government has apparently decided that nothing is to be gained by a hectoring tone. The President called for champagne, with which each side toasted the fruitful and friendly relationship they had established. But however warm the expressions of mutual regard, the press conference which followed the lunch made it clear that there was little agreement on how Uganda's decision to expel the Asians should be carried out.
Through the discussion I have discussed with the minister, and especially concerning the Asian, I had made it clear that I am not changing my mind, that the Asian who as British citizens, they will have to go to England, and he has accepted that, and in a very friendly and fruitful discussion which we have with him. During this, while we are waiting, the British government will not put problem to Uganda that because of this we should wait for long. Therefore, I think this arrangement, because we are now working day and night to process the citizenship of Asians, and therefore we shall be ready, because I am sure that I will not accept any delaying tactics here in Uganda.
Though Britain now accepts that President Amin will expel the Asians, there's clearly no agreement on how this can best be done. Mr. Ripon obviously thinks that 90, now 80 days is far too short a time. President Amin fears that Britain will use delaying tactics. Whether the massive movement operation that must now begin can be carried through painlessly looks doubtful. Richard Lindley, News at 10, State House, Entebbe.
I did emphasize that between friendly governments, one must deal with problems in a reasonable, just, humane and decent way. And I did get assurances from the President that the lives and property of the Asians would be protected, that proper arrangements would be made to value their property, that the money would be paid into the bank, that interest would be paid on it, and that funds would be allowed out broadly on the same basis as for the people who've been coming in under the quota system. Well, that's a start. We also agreed that we'd strengthen the working arrangements. And of course I pointed out that if you look at these things calmly and consider all the practical problems of the health certificates and the tax certificates and the determination of status and the arrangement of funds and transport and so forth, well, then you get a different picture than you do by saying tens of thousands of people must go out within 90 days. The President,
that's what he's still saying.
Still holds to his 90 days, but I did agree that we should perhaps meet again early in October, and he agreed also to see how things were working in practice.
Have you accepted his 90 days or not?
No, I didn't accept his 90 days. He said Mr. Ripon accepted it, I think, in the course of his press interview. But one has to accept it in the sense that that is the Uganda government's policy and decision. Certain consequences flow from it. And when it was put to him that if at the end of 90 days everybody hasn't been moved, what is going to happen to the Asians who are left behind because they can't be moved physically, or because they're Ugandan citizens, or because their status is undetermined? And he said, well, we'll put them in camps.
Are you in fact saying that in the next 90 days you can pressurize or cajole him into changing his mind?
Well, I don't know. I mean, one hopes that, as I said, that matters will be conducted in a humane and decent, orderly and just manner. So all one can do is to say we have fulfilled our British responsibilities in a reasonable way in that period. We will demonstrate, the realities, and hope that in that new situation there can be another look at the problem. But it's obviously difficult.
Well, this is the prime object of our policy, and this is the main purpose of all our representations to President Amin in Uganda, of which we're hoping to associate other countries as well. Because what we want to do is to make sure that these citizens of ours, if they are forced to leave Uganda, first of all, have a chance to go elsewhere if they want to, and not to come here unless they really want to come here. And if they do want to come here in sufficiently small numbers at a time for them to be absorbed in a tidy manner, tidy in a human sense, so that the necessary school and housing provisions can be made.
But if Mr. President Amin doesn't relax his time limit, do you see very large numbers coming here at once? And if so, will you have to direct them to particular areas?
Well, we can't direct. We haven't got powers of directing people in this country, and we are not going to take them. If they were to come in large numbers, and I very much hope they won't all at once, then we should presumably have to make some special temporary arrangements for their reception so that we could disperse them and so that they don't all flock in a sort of panic to the areas where they happen to know they have some compatriots already.
Will the passport holders be allowed to bring much of their property with them?
Well, President Amin has assured Mr. Ripon a day or two ago in Kampala that he would treat them equitably. I think he said they couldn't take all their assets out at once, they would be allowed to take some out at once and the rest over a period. And so far, President Amin has promised to treat them in an equitable manner. This, of course, is one of the things we are doing our best to insist on their behalf.
You said in your press conference that President Amin's 90-day deadline was too short for the orderly admission of Uganda passport holders. How long do you think we would need for an orderly admission of the passport holders?
Well, last year we took about 12,000, not just from Uganda, but from the three East African countries. And I think they were received fairly smoothly. And I expect that number could be increased, but of course they wouldn't all be from Uganda. But shall we say that if half those come from Uganda, we should really need a number of years. But we might not be given that long.
British Asians in Uganda have been sadly cast down by Mr. Ripon's failure to extract concessions from President Amin. With the time they've been given to leave the country growing shorter, their only comfort is Britain's reluctant commitment to take them in. More wealthy Asians want Britain to admit those who can afford to pay their passage and support themselves immediately. But so far, the High Commission has received no new instructions that will allow anyone to travel. In one of Kampala's most expensive suburbs, I talked with a British Asian lawyer and businessman too frightened to face the camera. He values his business and property here at £200,000. His house alone is worth £50,000. He has little hope that he'll get any of his money out. The British government, he says, will have to look after the property Asians are forced to abandon.
Not many of the Asians in this half-mile queue outside Kampala's immigration office are trying to establish their Ugandan citizenship. Some, like the lawyer we spoke to, have been trying to register as professional people exempt from expulsion, so that they have time to wind up their affairs. Until yesterday, they thought they'd be allowed to remain. Now, President Amin has decided to get rid of them too. Another 5,000, it's estimated, will join the exodus. but by far the majority here have come simply to have their Ugandan citizenship denied. They're glad to have their papers torn up, their passports cancelled. Then they believe Britain will have to take responsibility for them, even for those who long ago renounced their British status. No Asian here now feels that Uganda offers him any sort of future. Their only aim is to get out with as much money as they can.
But while the pressure builds up, there's as yet no way out. The airlines here have agreed not to carry any Asian anywhere at all unless his documents are perfectly in order. Kenya's borders are closed, and even those few families travelling by train from Kampala to Mombasa on their way to India have had a police escort all the way. When the real exodus, now being organised in Whitehall, does begin, it's perfectly possible that many will go by rail and sea as well as air. Richard Lindley, News at 10, Kampala. The Asians' problem is their visibility. As a minority in black Africa, they stand out just as they do in Britain. Most are middle class, well off. With their new cars and shiny motorbikes, they represent a world which most Africans simply cannot afford to enter. Ngara Road has long been designated an African trading area, yet Asian shops still exist here. It's hard for Africans to feel they're making any progress in taking over. President Kenyatta's policy is to push the Asians out slowly. But even Kenyatta cannot ignore basic African attitudes and widespread resentment of the Asians. President Kenyatta has now warned the Asians that they must identify themselves with the country or pack up and go. But for some of his ministers, that's not drastic enough. Martin Shikuku, a junior Minister of Home Affairs, has called Uganda's expulsion of the Asians timely. Could Asians in Kenya afford to ignore what was happening in Uganda?
Well, if they feel it will be safe to ignore it, then they should be advised not to, in my opinion, because what is happening in Uganda can happen here. And I think the writing is on the wall for the Asians in this country to read. It's only unfortunate for those that are blind, but for those who can read, for heaven's sake, let them read it and tell the blind ones. I personally believe that there are those among the Asians who are undermining the economy of this country, who are stumbling block in the way of an African from going up economically. All we have is a political independence. The flag is flying, the Kenya flag, the president is there, but he is fighting. Even the president himself is fighting to make sure that the trade is in the hands of the Africans. Now, the method we have taken is quite good, but it's a slow process. Taking into account the production, it will take us a long time, and a hungry man cannot wait.
Having seen what's happening in Uganda, is Kenya going to change its methods? Is it going to demand a speeding up of the process?
I won't speak of Kenya as such. I will speak of Butere, and I shall speak in Parliament to try and convince those who can see that we should also take the same move as far as Asians are concerned in this country.
Kenya's Asians have been deeply disturbed by what's happening in Uganda. I asked a British Asian lawyer what their reaction had been.
Well, firstly, it has brought home to us the extremely vulnerable position we occupy, and we have become conscious that time is running short for us. We feel we are living on borrowed time. Now, I think I must explain this, because it isn't as if we expected to have stayed on here indefinitely. We'd always known that whenever the local governments felt that our usefulness was over, we would be asked to leave. But I don't think anybody could have anticipated a mass expulsion order, the kind that General Amin has issued. And it gives everybody concerned a very short time.
Well-to-do Asians at a drive-in cinema. For how much longer can they expect to enjoy their comfortable life in Kenya? It wouldn't take very much for the Asians here to find themselves in exactly the same position as their friends and relatives in Uganda. The death of President Kenyatta, a struggle for power, and the expulsion of the Asians could well become the rallying cry for any insecure African politician seeking popularity. It's for this reason that the Asians say that Britain must visibly increase the number of vouchers it at present grants for entry into Britain. For only if the Africans see that Asians are leaving Kenya at a faster rate, they say, can the threat of another mass deportation on the scale of Ugandans be avoided? Richard Lindley, News at 10, Nairobi.
Oh, I think we have to cope with them, and it is terribly important to keep the thing in perspective. There are, of course, a great many of them. There will be a great many of them. They represent a very great human problem, but I think it's a manageable problem in a country of this size.
You don't think that our social services, our health, education, employment services will be overstrained?
I think there are areas in which these services could be very severely strained by the influx of further immigrants, and although the board has not yet met, I'm sure it would want to use its maximum influence to guide the new immigrants to areas where these problems are likely to be less acute.
How can you encourage immigrants to go to less sensitive areas?
We can't direct them, obviously. What I think we can do is to point to the advantages of going to these areas.
But won't they naturally go to the areas where their brothers...
Many of them, I think, will, and this is...
but won't this exacerbate the colour problem that exists in those cities?
If they do go in large numbers to these cities, yes.
But you have no powers in any way to direct them to go to other places?
None whatever. All we can offer is encouragement and inducement.
Southall looks like any London borough until you notice that most people in the streets have dark skins and you look more closely at the shops. The Asian community here started over 15 years ago, and today some 18,000 Asians live in an area of 1¼ square miles. They run their own businesses, and the 3 cinemas in Southall all show Asian films. They've built their own Sikh temple in a suburban street. Local coloured people feel a new influx of Ugandan Asians is unlikely because of a language difference, but they think they could absorb some of them. They feel, though, that the local council has not planned sufficiently to cater for their existing numbers. Few Asians apply for council housing, preferring to buy or rent furnished homes. But it's the problem of education which mainly worries Ealing Borough Council.
Well, we would just definitely not cope at the moment. We just could not meet the schooling requirements. It would mean a very massive increase in busing of children out to schools. It would mean a very substantial increase in the number of temporary classrooms and that to meet the situation. And already our schools in other parts of the borough are losing play space because we're having to erect now to meet situations as they are at the moment. Schools and temporary hutments in school playgrounds to meet with the existing demand of education. Any massive increase of this would obviously worsen. I think we'd be in the danger at the initial stages, at any rate, of a breakdown of our educational systems.
Are you pressing the government to be more concerned about the internal problems of settling the Asians?
Oh, indeed. This is the very basis of the letter I sent to the Home Office as soon as the Uganda matter came to light. We feel that the government are not taking sufficient notice of the fact that in dealing with the external problem of dealing with British nationals coming into this country, they're not giving sufficient consideration to the internal problems that is going to be created unless the government are able to control where these people are able to go. It's just no good putting more stress on stress areas.
Whatever the local councils, or indeed the local people, may wish, it seems likely that it's to places like Southall that the Ugandan Asians will come, because it's in places like this that the Asian communities are already established. The only thing that's likely to change that would be an actual direction from the government telling the immigrants to settle somewhere else, and that's not planned at the moment. Geoffrey Archer, News at 10, Southall.
The Canadian team of immigration officials is now ready for business in offices next to the British High Commission. Mr. Trudeau has already said that Canada will take exceptional measures to admit those Asians who might not otherwise qualify to go there. I asked Mr. Xavier Levine, Special Assistant to the Canadian Minister of Immigration, how the policy would work in practice.
The purpose of our selection criteria is to assess, to see whether a person can establish himself successfully in Canada. Now, if a prospective immigrant here is rather old and our selection criteria lays an emphasis on a younger person, then perhaps, if he's a successful businessman here, perhaps that will be taken into consideration.
Of course, the question that people in Britain want answered is, how many Asians is Canada going to take?
Well, As it stands right now, we don't know. We can't really assess until we see how many people pick up application forms, how many fill them out. We have no intention. The Cabinet, of course, when they did make their decision, made it on humanitarian purposes. Of course, one of the other considerations that were involved, at least one of the results of our humanitarian decision was aiding Britain as a leading member of the Commonwealth, and we also feel that these Asians could be very valuable to our Canadian economy.
With offers of help from several countries, but no guarantees on numbers, the British High Commission goes on stamping passports with entry certificates, uncertain of how many people will be coming to Britain. British Asians have always insisted that there are far fewer of them than the 57,000 figure that officials here have been working on. Some will now be staying behind whether they want to or not, because President Amin has been persuaded by his ministers to hold on to doctors, teachers and others whose sudden departure would bring chaos to Uganda. Because only 68% of those called last week to collect their entry certificates actually turned up, it's now been said that far fewer than 3/4 of those expected to go to Britain will actually do so. But this Monday, 96% showed up. And in any case, these people are not a good sample on which to base predictions. Richard Linde, News at 10, Kampala.
We have got very gross overcrowding in some parts of the immigrant areas. If these other Ugandan Asians come, there's no doubt that they will add to overcrowding, and once they arrive within the city, it'll be extraordinarily difficult to keep track of them, and they will be lost within the population already here. We won't get rid of them once they've come.
Well, you might. I mean, they might come just for a short time, mightn't they, and then go to some other town?
They might. I think that's unlikely, because as you say, they will want to stay with relatives, and they'll want to have the job opportunities which exist here to some extent. But there'll be gross overcrowding, and it could lead to a breakdown of our social services.
Alderman Bowder, may I put this to you? Other places in the country, particularly around the London area, are facing just as great problems as Leicester, but their complaint is by no means as strident as Leicester's. Why have you put your case so forcibly, so stridently?
Well, I think the London boroughs, probably sprawling over quite a large area, don't have quite the community identity we've got here. We've had many immigrants here, 30,000 out of a total of 280,000, and I think people are very conscious that they want to absorb the ones we've got. There's no problem with the existing immigrants we have. We want it to stay that way, and we believe in getting on and helping ourselves before it's too late.
Is there any evidence at all that the small trickle that have already arrived are producing any problems?
Well, yes, you see, the number of places in schools for which children are waiting is as much as 700. Now, it's going up at the rate of about 50 Ugandan Asians a week, and whereas only a fortnight ago we had 200 people waiting for places, we now have 300 Ugandan Asians waiting.
This is 50 a week increase in the number of children trying to get into schools.
That is right, and we say this indicates that the parents are arriving in Leicester. We don't accept that the government has the correct viewpoint, that the Asians aren't yet starting to come to Leicester.
If the thousands of Uganda Asians who face expulsion were worried about their future before, they're extremely alarmed now. The reason is not hard to find. President Amin, who went on record the other day with a statement that Hitler had the right answer when he gassed 6 million Jews, has warned them that if they aren't out of the country by November the 8th, they'll be rounded up and placed in camps under military control. Do you think you're going to get out by November the 8th?
No, it's very difficult.
It's not possible.
Camps are waiting for us.
What? The camps, the military camps. What do you think about that?
We cannot tell you now how they are going to treat us.
You're a bit worried about it.
Sure.
What is worrying them especially is that the promised exodus to Britain has so far shown no signs of getting off the ground. In fact, they say quite the contrary. The British High Commission, instead of speeding up its entry permit procedure, has slowed it down. Only 50 or 60 Asians are being processed a day now, instead of 300 or more a week or so ago. How long have you been waiting here?
Last night.
Last night you slept here?
Yeah.
How many days have you been here?
7 at least.
7 at least.
Never reached the door.
You've never reached the door?
Yeah. Never reached the door.
Well, you're going to reach the door today, aren't you?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
You don't think so? Because if they're doing 80 a day, I would say they're not 80 in front of you, are they, right now?
Not now. But every time we enter, there's always a fault in our documents. I mean, they find one at least.
We appreciate that at the present these people are working. They are giving us every assistance, whatever possible they way. But at the same time, there are certain obstructions which is causing people more delay. And there is a deadline of 7. You understand that?
So what do you think the upshot is going to be? You're just not going to make the deadline?
We don't know. That's why people are worried.
And these are only the quota voucher Asians whose applications were in the pipeline before General Amin made his expulsion order last month. The big flood of 25,000 is still to come, and not one has so far been issued with an entry permit. The Asians also ask why the airlift is taking so long to get started. The main reason seems to be money. A full-scale airlift will cost something like £3 million. Uganda has no foreign currency, and our other East African partners, Kenya and Tanzania, have said they have no intention of bailing out General Amin. That leaves the British taxpayer, and if we don't pay, the prospect facing the Asians is of being rounded up at gunpoint one morning and crowded into camps in the remote countryside. It's a grim thought, but one that most of the Asians here I have talked to now regard as a real possibility. They still have hope, but not much. Sandy Gore, News at 10, Kampala.
Flight number EC002 from Uganda arrived at Stansted this morning 2 hours behind schedule after a delayed takeoff in Entebbe. Each of the 189 refugees on board had paid £110 to be on this, the first of the special flights bringing the expelled Asians to Britain. But these felt they were the lucky ones. With the situation in Uganda rapidly deteriorating, they expressed fears for the safety of the thousands of Asians yet to come. Many told of being robbed at gunpoint before leaving. Can you tell me what you were able to bring out of Uganda?
Well, I thought of bringing a lot of things, which I had to leave them there. Yesterday when we were coming to the Entebbe airport, there was, there was trouble within Tanzania or Uganda government. So we were wearing some golden rings, some golden bangles, and a watch. They removed our things.
They were taken from you, were they?
Yeah, they took it from us. And from Kampala to Entebbe, there was about, let's say, 7 times checking. They were all army people disturbing us a lot.
I have got 1 tape recorder and 1 watch and 1 camera, that's all. They have taken my gold watch, is worth about 300 quid. They have taken my pounds, they have taken my Uganda money, also about 840 shilling. And completely, most of them have lost the gold. Bangles, these ladies have been robbed, bangles, chains, nothing has been left. Rings, diamond rings, and everything.
Today's airlift was the first big test for the Ugandan Resettlement Board. Each arrival first went through a check to establish age, occupation, and if they had relatives here who could offer a home.
And you have an address to which to go? Have you a house to...
Yeah, I've got.
Could you let me know the name of the house or the place? Do you know? Then could you ask him, do they know whether he is coming?
Yes, this is what
all right.
Those who did have relatives to meet them were given a compulsory medical check. But doctors here say that all the immigrants appear to be in good health. Today's examinations will be followed up by family doctors in the areas in which they settle. Voluntary workers who provided food and drink for the refugees also laid on supplies of warm clothing for those who'd come unprepared for the British climate. In fact, despite their difficulties, today's influx of immigrants demanded relatively little. Only £20 was paid out in supplementary benefits to cover people's immediate needs. Nearly half the refugees were met by relatives, most of them going to northwest London, Blackburn, Leeds, Edinburgh and Cardiff. The rest were taken to the temporary transit camp at RAF Stratus Hall in Suffolk. It's now 4 hours since the immigrants arrived here, and the last of the Asians are now on their way. There's been some confusion this morning, most of it caused, I'm afraid, by the world's press and television, who at times have outnumbered the immigrants. But on today's experience, the settlement board say that they can easily handle 2 or perhaps even 3 flights a day once the major airlift gets underway. Norman Rees, News at 10, Stansted Airport.
There were in fact 101 people without relatives or friends to take care of them.
When they arrived at RAF Stratis Hall in mid-afternoon, they were beginning to lose some of the bewilderment they'd felt at their reception at Stansted. This camp, one of 3 in the country, can take up to 1,000 people at a time, but it's intended only for a short stay, while the Asians choose a place to go to and try to find a house and a job. Most of them were feeling the cold, and a cup of hot tea was laid on. Women of the WRVS and the Red Cross busied themselves continuously. No attention was spared for the youngsters and the babies especially. Local MP and junior minister Mr. Eldon Griffiths helped to sort out the language problem.
To give any service if you want.
Well, now, how many of those who are in the room do not speak English?
Well, I think most of them don't know English.
Just a moment. He is acting as a spokesman. Good. He's prepared to interpret. Oh, well, and I think it might be a good idea if you were to give instructions in English and he were then to translate.
Yes.
Then bureaucracy took over again as papers were rechecked and individual families' needs reassessed. Anyone who hadn't had a medical checkup at the airport had to wait his turn and have one now. This was what caused the afternoon's delays. So by the time the first few families were installed in their houses, they'd already been on English soil for up to 8 hours. But after their ordeal in Uganda and the harassment and strains of their journey to Britain, these Asians were in no mood to complain as they settled before the coal fires in their new surroundings. Michael Oliver, News at 10, RAF Stratis Hall. This second relief flight was welcomed by the same grey weather that greeted the first batch nearly a week ago. Of those on board, 2/3 went on to the temporary resettlement camp at Stradishall in Suffolk. They said the journey from Kampala to the airport had been trouble-free because they'd had a police escort to protect them from the army. But those who'd had to travel into the capital from the country hadn't been so lucky, especially the girls.
My town is nearly 150 miles from Kampala, and in between they were really molesting the girls especially, not me. They asked me about my passport, but I didn't show, because whenever we saw British passport, they became quite rude on British Asians especially. And females were really molested, in fact. And I had been hearing that some of females were even raped.
Have you seen anybody being mistreated by the army?
Yeah, I had a friend. Minis are banned over there. She didn't wear a mini dress, in fact. And they caught her and they said, it's a mini. She said it. And she told her, they asked her which passport is she holding, and she told her it's British. And they just started beating her. They said, why are you here still? Without no reason. And then, so now, in fact, my daddy doesn't allow me to leave a house, especially since I'm a girl. Because military people are all over the town there, and they're with the guns, so.
Are the girls especially worried?
Yeah, more. Yeah, girls. More than the boys, in fact.
Well, of course, they are very, very much worried, especially women. They are more worried, When you get this verified citizenship, if it is a girl, just don't check the document, just approve it. And they say, that we want the girls to stay here, we'll get married to them. And in some cases, a husband is not a citizen and the wife is a citizen. You see, they tell the husband that you go, you leave your wife here, don't worry for her, we'll get married to her.
When you read there, if they see the British passport, they ask that, they push us and they do like, you're holding British passport, you go, don't stay here. Then they tell us to take out shoes and socks, everything. Then they are allowing us to go front. When you go front, same problem is there.
And yesterday, all the people were panicking. They just wouldn't leave the place without a police escort, because these so-called security forces are the biggest thieves in the place. They're robbing every Asian of their property and valuables. This is all. It's very sad to say, but I must tell the truth.
Nachiket Devlukia, his wife Hazumati, and their daughter Nalexia arrived in Britain exactly a week ago. He's 28. A month ago in Uganda, he had a prosperous wholesale business, his own house and a new car. Now he has 3 suitcases of clothes. They spent their first 3 days in England with friends, but there wasn't enough room and they moved into one room at the Kensington Student Centre. I asked him what his plans were.
My plans is I had a wholesale business. I want to go into business. But before that, as I was handling plenty of cash in my shop, I'll go to if I get a job as a clerk or a cashier, it will be better for me.
Because you weren't able to take out any money from your business?
Yeah, not a single money we were allowed to take out. Even certain cash we had, I had at the airport, it was removed from me.
So really it's a case of completely starting again?
Yes, a completely new life.
What about housing? Have you been able to look for a house yet?
For myself, I've got no knowledge about the housing, how they are provided here, or how we are buying, or what help we are getting from the government. But I've got a brother in Coventry who is trying for a house.
Would you hope to buy a house?
At present, I don't have the cash, but my brother has got some money, and if we get help from the settlement board, he'll be able to buy.
Do you feel optimistic about this completely fresh start in England, or has it all been a terrible blow?
Well, we never expected about this thing to happen. It was just like a miracle, you see. Just like an earthquake, which you never expect. We are very happy. We had got I had started my new business. I had plenty of goods in my shop, and I bought a new car. It was not 1 year old even, and this thing happened.
It was the day when Nairobi railway station looked more like Bombay or Calcutta. Hundreds of Asians now living in Kenya lined the platform as the special train pulled in. Some were hoping to catch a glimpse of a relative. Others were there to distribute food and drinks provided by the local Hindu community. For the most part, the passengers had had little difficulty in Kampala, but there were the by now familiar stories of looting by soldiers. Some spoke too of being beaten up. This man told me he'd been attacked in the street by 4 soldiers and left for dead. The British consul in Nairobi, Mr. David Avery, checked passports and spoke to many of the passengers.
Only checking. It's a checking event, yes. They were not beaten.
There was tight security at the station, designed to ensure that none of the expelled Asians left the train to slip illegally into Kenya. For many of the older passengers, the train journey was the final irony. They, or their parents, had originally emigrated to Uganda to build the railway, which was now being used to expel them. The train took them to Mombasa to board the ship for Bombay. The passengers paid for their tickets in Kampala, and many had no other money left when they came aboard. But voluntary societies made sure there was a plentiful supply of fresh provisions. In all, the ship was taking 550 Asians to India, and 2 more sailings are planned before the November deadline. But once again, because of delays in processing in Kampala, the number who arrived fell far short of the number expected. And when the state of Haryana finally set sail for the 9-day voyage to Bombay, there were still 300 empty berths. Robert Southgate, ITN, Mombasa.
A great deal of hanging about is done at Stradishall. Asians waiting to find out what's going to happen to them, waiting for houses, waiting for jobs. It can be a pretty boring life.
Life was a lot less boring today. Mr. Kumar's visit was an occasion for, among other things, a good sing-song. The organisers had led us to believe that the whole thing was going to be a bit like Bob Hope's concerts in Vietnam. They'd reckoned without one thing. Mr. Kumar doesn't sing, at least not until he really has to. Nor does he act like Bob Hope either. I am, he confided, rather more like Sir Laurence Olivier. After 18 years in the Indian film business and 56 pictures, Mr. Kumar is very rich and very famous, to Asian audiences that is, and he was quickly besieged by a lot of very excited fans.
All right.
So was Miss Persis Kambata, a former Miss India and the girl who greets passengers onto Indian planes in the commercials. Her most memorable achievement in films to date, she says, was to be kissed on the screen, something Indian actresses hardly ever do. The visitors got a big welcome. This was, after all, the most entertaining thing to happen at Stradishall so far. But Mr. Kumar told the Asians to be very grateful for the help the British had given them.
I think it's a great help, which you can never forget in your life. And please don't forget, love them because they have loved you. And love begets love.
After lunch, refugee style, the 2 stars left. They'd certainly achieved what the organisers had hoped for, a little light relief. Mr. Kumar returned to his latest picture, called The Black and the White,
Miss Gambato went to see a film producer. And the 1,449 refugees at Stradishall stayed put, waiting for homes and jobs. Michael Brunson, News at 10, Stradishall Camp.
The propaganda started at the time when the Uganda government announced that it was going to ask British government to take responsibility of its citizens who were out in Uganda.
You mean the Asians?
Asians, the Asians, yes.
Do you consider that General Amin has handled the Asian problem well?
Oh yes, very well. In fact, we feel, people in Uganda feel that they were given much time to get out of the country. Other countries which have done the same didn't give as much as 3 months. Even just sent away these people without property, without compensating their properties which is left behind. But I feel Uganda has done so much for these Asians that we don't deserve the bad publicity we've been subjected to in Britain.
Do you consider that Britain has behaved honourably in the matter of the Asians?
Well, it's a matter of honour. They were obliged to take the Asians. This is their responsibility. These are British citizens and not Ugandan citizens. Anybody in the world would have expected them to accept their citizens.
The figures show that this is the place to which most of the Ugandan Asians have come so far. No, it's not Leicester, or Southall, or Bradford, or any of the well-known immigrant areas. This is the London borough of Brent. In Wembley High Street at 4 o'clock of an afternoon, there's plenty of evidence of the borough's long history of accepting immigrants. Among the school children, there are the sons and daughters of the Irish, the Jews, the Poles, the Hungarians, the West Indians, the Pakistanis, and most recently the East African Asians, who over the years have decided to make Brent their home. At least 1,000 Ugandan Asians have now come here because they want the security of a warm welcome. They know that there are relatives here who'll give them temporary shelter at least. Fathers and brothers who, like all the other immigrants who've come here, are attracted by the reservoir of reasonably priced housing in the rows of semis in the borough. Brent Council has not made a fuss. Its leader, Alderman Philip Hartley, came here in the 30s as a refugee from Nazi Germany. Now he goes visiting the new refugees, talking to the Ugandan Asians, even offering them the prospect of buying one of these semi-detached villas for themselves.
I have come to say that if you need any help from the town hall with accommodation, we shall help you with a mortgage if that helps. Yeah. Mortgage. We can't give you any house or flat because we have already a big waiting list.
News of the council's mortgage scheme has spread like wildfire. It hasn't finally been approved yet, but already the new arrivals from Uganda are coming in for interviews. The council want to stress that it's available for all residents of the borough, not just Ugandan Asians. But the scheme, if it gets through the council, will mean that loans of up to £12,000 will be easily available. The council is lucky to have on its staff a former magistrate from Uganda who came to Brent 7 years ago. Mr. Chandalal Patel has become their chief troubleshooter, dealing with all the problems the new arrivals face. Their main demand is clear. They want houses, because without houses, the jobs they find in Brent are of little value. But houses and jobs are just one of the problems. Schooling is another. Some of the borough's schools already find that as many as 80% of their pupils are immigrants. At least 400 Ugandan Asian children will now, in addition, need schooling. And surprisingly, the council believes it can cope. It's determined that pupil-teacher ratios are not going to suffer, just as it's adamant that no Ugandan Asians are going to jump the housing list queue of 5,000. Brent believes that by keeping its mouth shut and quietly getting on with the job of providing the extra facilities needed, that the 2,000 Ugandan Asians it's ultimately expecting will be quietly and effectively absorbed. Michael Brunson, News at 10, Brent in North London.
You know, there was a big queue over there, and I thought that either school letters, I'll get a visa over here at the London airport. There was a...
You came here with a school certificate?
With the school certificates, yes.
Did you think that would be good enough to get into Britain?
Yes, I thought so.
But surely your relatives, your aunt and uncle that you came with, would have told you that you needed an entry certificate to come here.
Even they told me that if you have got the school letters and everything, you might get a visa over there. That's why I came here.
But you qualified for an entry certificate.
I qualified, but there was a big queue over there. I had a ticket of 6th and I went there on the 5th. And there was a big queue. I thought that if I stay over there for 2 days in the line and sleep over there, it might get late, you know. That's why I came here. And I wanted to come here before the deadline.
Ms. Samji, you're here for 3 months. What do you think will happen to you if you go back to Kampala at the end of the 3 months?
I don't know what will happen after this deadline, so I'm afraid to go now back.
Do you have any indication or any idea as to whether you'll be allowed to stay here after 3 months?
I think so. I'll be allowed to stay because of I got school certificates and everything, so I can learn here, so I can get visa from that one.
Mr. Samji, during the 3 months, who will be looking after you and what will you be doing?
My brother will look after me, my uncles, and I'll be studying, I think.
No, these would be people who would be rotting in concentration camps, prepared by President Amin, and they would be there simply because of the colour of their skins and the fact that they held British passports. Mr. Chairman, that would have been a sight presented to us on our television screens night after night this Christmas if we had not acted. I cannot believe that anyone in this country with our sense of fairness, of humanity, and of responsibility would have regarded such an outcome to President Amin's decrees as being acceptable to the British people.
Oh, if he wants to kick out the British, he can. Well, he's virtually done it, hasn't he? But the important thing is if he kicks them out, or if they want to go, that they should be able to get in future their compensation for their goods. And so this, we have to try and get a legal basis for this right intact. Now, as far as international action is concerned, of course, we've got the United Nations. I thought it was right, it's the last day of the sitting of the United Nations State, I thought it was right to alert them, so we've taken advantage of a procedural motion that is going on there anyhow to raise this question in the United Nations.
Yes, but nothing can be done there for some time.
Well, it comes down today, raising the matter so that all the world is acquainted with what Amin has done. A great many of them apt to ignore this kind of thing. Now, in the Commonwealth, we've got the various, we've got Commonwealth Secretariat, and so we can use that to find the most appropriate Commonwealth forum in which this can all be raised.
But why did you refuse Mr. Callaghan's idea or suggestion to convene a special Commonwealth conference to deal with this matter?
No, because I simply don't think it will turn out to be practical politics. But I would consult, I told him I would consult the Commonwealth Secretariat on this matter, but I was very doubtful if this is the way in which to deal with it.
Sir Alec in the House today, Mr. Jeremy Thorpe called General Amin a black Hitler. Do you feel as strongly as that?
He's a dictator. He is totally without any principle, as far as one can see, in his dealings with other people. And one's bound to say that he's acted on purely racial lines and discriminatory lines. And therefore, these are two very dangerous things.
When we arrived at State House in Entebbe, General Amin announced himself as the Black Hitler, the name given to him by the Liberal leader Jeremy Thorpe. He said he was happy with the title because it meant he was a strong, tough man. But he said he was not a racialist and his actions were not directed at Britain. About 100 British personnel on the Uganda aid programme will have to leave before December the 31st. They can take their belongings, but only £50 in cash like the Asians. I asked the President if, after seizing British businesses and expelling the first Britons, he wanted to keep any links with Britain.
Yes, I have already said more than one time that I consider the people of Great Britain are my best friend because they are the first people to teach Ugandans in educations.
You say that you want the British to be your best friends, yet would you describe your actions as pro-British?
My action, if you are actually to see and check it carefully, you will find this not against Britain at all. It is only transferring the economy to the hands of Ugandans. And even in Britain, the whole economy, it has been controlled by Britain, except there are very many Jews who are also controlling your economy in Britain. I think you know this. And as well as in the United States of America, the whole economy there is controlled by Jews.
Mr. President, Sir Alec Douglas Hume has called your speech outrageous by any standards of civilized behavior. Could relations with Britain sink any lower?
Sir Alex Douglas Hume's statement is only government. It is not the whole Britons, because is only one person who is speaking, but according to the informations and the letters I am receiving from the very many friends in Britain, and they are actually encouraging me that I have taken the right step to transfer the economy from non-citizen to the citizen, and what he's saying, it will not actually hurt me at all or people of Uganda, but we shall continue to be very friendly with Great Britain, and even after transferring the economy completely to the hands of Ugandans, I will strengthen the relationship even furthermore with the Great Britain.
Are you properly rewarding those Britons who spent such a long time in Uganda and contributed to the country's welfare and economy?
You see, we are not just nationalizing without paying them. You see, they are going to be paid what on their property.
How will you replace those Britons who are leaving?
Yes, this does not worry me at all, because I have already received a very successful and also encouragement report from the teams I have sent in Africa, in Arab worlds, in Asia, and in Europe, also Latin, the Negro Americans. There are very many volunteers, and also we have very many Ugandans who have been here without a job, and they are actually professional Ugandans, and some are overseas working, are doctors overseas. They are now coming back, and they will take over the position. And you find that there are no school, it has been closed. Even now we have a crash program for the university students who are going to teach.
Despite his optimism, the economy is already in trouble. Shops that were owned by Asians are still closed. There's a shortage of sugar, one of Uganda's main crops. The expulsion of the British can only add to his problems. Keith Hatfield, News at 10, Kampala.
Though most of the refugees have had to spend some time in the resettlement camps, there are today only 8,000. That's fewer than a third still there. The others have already been settled into houses, and most of them into jobs too. These are presents given by firms, charities and generous locals for the children at West Malling. They comprise half of the 518 people still here. The gifts will be handed out at a traditional Boxing Day party. Christmas is new to nearly all of the Asians, who are mostly of the Muslim and Hindu religions, but they all entered into the spirit of things by dressing up and greeting everyone with a happy Christmas. Lunch was uncompromisingly British, with roast turkey and stuffing, Christmas pudding with brandy sauce and mince pies. No curry alternative. The children were enjoying themselves, and they effectively disproved any suggestion that they wouldn't take to Father Christmas when he appeared. Tomorrow's party, besides the presents, will contain a Punch and Judy show, a magician and cartoon films. The Asians have had their first British Christmas, but how many of them will be celebrating in the same way next year when they should all be out of camps and resettled is anyone's guess. Michael Oliver, ITN, West Malling.
In all, 28,000 expelled Asians finished up in Britain. The majority of them have now moved on into the wider community, but about 1,000 are still waiting for resettlement in the 2 remaining transit camps. Most of them will not have to wait there much longer. At West Malling, about 20 leave every week, although a hard core of difficult cases remain. Old people who can't find jobs, families with young children for whom housing is not yet available, and perhaps most tragic of all, a scattering of families who've been forcibly separated from their fathers and husbands. Mrs. Nina Radia, the wife of a rich mill owner, not only lost her home and most of her money when she was expelled from Uganda, she also lost her husband. She has a British passport, but her husband is officially stateless, and so has not been allowed to join her here. Mrs. Radia, who speaks little English, hasn't seen her husband for almost a year. She prays every night that the Home Office will one day let him join her. Until this morning, Mrs. Suda Puppet was also separated from her husband. Then she heard he'd unexpectedly turned up at London Airport today on a flight from Ceylon.
I knew at morning, 10:30.
And had you expected to have this news today?
No, not
Mrs. Poppet immediately left for a reunion with her husband, whom she hasn't seen for over 6 months. He's now being held at a detention centre until it's decided whether he can stay in England. But for today at least, one divided family is together again. So while for one family the long agony of separation seems at last to be coming to an end, for other wives, and there are still about 200 of them, reunion with their stateless husbands seems as far away as ever. Robert Hargreaves, ITN, at the Uganda Resettlement Centre, West Malling in Kent.
Many of the 28,000 Ugandan Asians who landed in the chill British autumn came with little more than the lightweight clothing on their backs and a few bundles of fairly worthless possessions that Amin's men had allowed them to keep. A few joined relatives and friends already in Britain. The others went into resettlement camps. Today, there are just under 1,000 still living in 2 camps, one in Kent, the other in Lincolnshire. Many of those who have left the camps have found life in Britain tough. A quarter of them are still unemployed. Others, often skilled men, are working at jobs well below their capabilities. But there are success stories too, like that of the 4 Sayani brothers, who were among the first to be expelled. Starting here with virtually nothing, they had to abandon a £40,000 tailoring factory in Uganda. They set up in the boutique business. One of the shops in a prosperous London suburb is run by the youngest brother, Diamond Sayani, with his wife, Shaynaz. 2 of the other brothers are now touring the Far East for special stocks for more boutiques they plan to open soon. Another boutique is run by the 4th brother, ironically named Amin Mohammed, with his wife Mazia. They made their mistakes at first, witnessed still by racks of cut-priced, oversized garments, because they forgot that British girls are not built on quite the same proportions as Ugandan ladies. But they soon sorted themselves out, as I learned when I asked Amin Mohammed how things were going now for them.
Well, I think we are doing very well here.
Better than
yes,
you were
better
in
than
Uganda?
Yes. And there are a lot of opportunities in this country here, provided you are willing to work.
Well, now, would you say, in fact, looking back, that in a sense, President Amin had done you a favor by booting you out.
Yes, I quite agree with you.
How has your turnover been going?
Well, the first 2 months we had a turnover of about £350 a week. But now we are doing about between 15 and 1600 pounds a week.
Is it getting bigger all the time?
Yes.
Now, of course, a lot of people haven't been nearly as successful as you, and they're still living in resettlement camps. Is this their fault or what?
Well, I think, say, if them, I don't know what about them, but if you want to do something in this country, it is very easy. You must have some initiative to start something with. And I think once you start something, you get on well.